this way then. Record it that way. It'll take longer to upload, but we'll try it out. Let's wait one more minute. Okay, I haven't heard from anybody else. And we can get started with the two of us.
Excuse me.
You all right?
I put a peppermint in and it was really strong.
That happens. That happens. All right. Are y'all up for starting just to, and whoever comes will come?
Mm-hmm.
Fantastic.
Fine with me.
So first question that I have, I don't know if either of you, oh, this was here for you, I'm sorry.
That's okay.
Did either of you have a chance to experience any, or have you ever experienced a Passover Seder or a Passover service?
No.
Okay. Yeah.
When I was here before,
Mm-hmm.
I did. I attended. It was second Seder.
Second Seder?
Mm-hmm.
And do you have any, it might have been a while ago, but do you have any questions from that experience? Or anything you can remember stood out to you?
No, the cantor actually led that.
Mm-hmm.
So it was interesting. In fact, my entire Sunday school.
Oh, wow.
Yes. So, but that's been a long time ago and I can't really remember. I know we did have questions, but we went over them with the cantor.
Right. Is there anything that stood out to you?
Not really.
Okay. So let's dive in then. We're going to do holidays today instead of next week, because next week I've invited some rabbi friends to come on Zoom and to tell us about their different movements of Judaism. So we'll dive right in to Jewish holidays. Now, Judaism is not the only religion that has lots of holidays, of course. So I'm going to give us just a moment to read a few excerpts about sacred days. These are three different rabbis who are explaining their idea of why celebrating holidays is so important in the Jewish tradition. And I'd like for us to read these three and to figure out which one resonates with you the most. And then we'll ask the question, why celebrate holidays? It's a broad question that that might have a simple answer, but maybe not a simple answer. So I'll give us 2 minutes to read. So for Rabbi Harold Kushner, why celebrate holidays? Why celebrate the Jewish holidays?
to keep them alive.
Hmm.
I mean, to keep remembering
Right.
what it means, what that holiday means.
Right. To bring the past into the present.
Mm-hmm.
Right. How about Michael Strassfeld?
I like what he says about not going around in circles to make sure we're traveling. Because I've been one to go around in circles for sure. When I've been just trying to find my way, find the truth. And so I like both of these points because they talk about transcending the mundane, and considering what's sacred. Yeah.
Right. Right. Remembering, I kind of see, I didn't mean to lay this out on the page like that, but I see Rabbi Kushner's explanation as looking as past focused, bringing past into the present. And Rabbi Strassfield looks at the present. Where am I now? And making sure I'm not going around in circles now. And then Rabbi Greenberg is forward facing. So over Passover, I gave a couple of Divrei Torah, a couple of talks on Passover as pointing towards the future, as reminding us that there is a better time to come, that we're responsible for getting us there, but it's possible we can get there. And so for Rabbi Greenberg, that's in a sense what he's saying, right? That we're facing towards the future. We're celebrating now to give us a taste of what that better future might look like.
Yeah.
And I think another reason that's not on here is because, as we'll see today, God said so. So we are going to look at some verses in Torah and then later in Tanakh and see where God commanded some of these holidays. And that's going to be a refrain we hear all the time. We've got lots of different spiritual ideas of why to do things. And at the end of the day, one of the reasons or a very significant reason we do a lot of these things is because God said so. So what Jewish holidays? Joyce knows a lot of Jewish holidays, but just off the top of our heads, what are the Jewish holidays that you know? Either Joyce or Sephora.
Shabbat is about all I know about.
Great, Shabbat. Cool.
Hanukkah.
Hanukkah, great.
Well, Passover was one.
Passover.
I know a lot of them. I can't pronounce.
That's okay.
Purim that
Purim.
passed a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah, you know more than Shabbat.
Yeah.
What about the holidays that you're going to be stressing out about in just a few months?
Yeah. October and September, August, September.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we've got all the high holidays. We've got a whole lot of holidays. So you've heard about a lot of these holidays. We're going to go into depth about why we celebrate them and what they are. But first, we'll look a little bit at this calendar. So I'm going to get out of this showing of it so that we can really zoom in. I like this wheel of the calendar. So our calendar is a lunisolar calendar. So what that means is that it is that we focus, that each month depends on the passing of the moon. So the month starts when there's like a tiny little sliver of moon. The new moon is when a new month starts. But we try to align with the solar calendar as well. So every few years, there's a particular equation for how to calculate the years, but every few years, we add an extra month in so that we can align better with the Gregorian calendar. So just to go through the year, our Jewish calendar starts, at least in modern days, our Jewish calendar starts in the month of Tishri or Tishrei, which is about September, October. And Tishrei has a whole lot of different holidays. We've got Rosh Hashanah, which is our Jewish New Year, Yom Kippur, which is a big fast day and our Day of Atonement, Sukkot, we build some booths, we build a hut, and we eat in the hut, and we celebrate in the hut. We shake around some plants. We'll learn more about that in a few minutes. We'll learn more about shaking plants. Shmini Atzeret is kind of the end of Sukkot, and Atzeret means basically a stopping point. So Shmini Atzeret and Shmini is the 8th. So it's really the 8th day of Sukkot, and it's a stopping point for Sukkot. And we say some prayers for rain, asking for the harvest season to treat us well. We're just about to start the harvest season. And if we think about that word atzeret of stopping, or leaving, we're leaving this crazy holiday season, because it's quite a lot packed into one month. And Shmini Atzeret is celebrated at the same time as Simchat Torah, or one day after the other, depending on what part of the world you're in. Simchat Torah is a day where we celebrate the Torah. We start reading the Torah each year on Simchat Torah, and then we go all the way through, and then we start all the way over again on Simchat Torah. Cheshvan is sometimes called Mar Cheshvan or Bitter Cheshvan, because it doesn't have any holidays in it, and it's the only month that really doesn't have any holidays. Kislev has Chanukah, and Chanukah is kind of in between Kislev and Tevet. Shvat has the birthday of the trees, Tu B'Shvat, and there's a minor fast day in Tevet also. But Tu B'Shvat happens in Shvat. Adar has Purim, and then Adar is the month that sometimes repeats itself, so that we align with the Gregorian calendar a little better. Nisan, which we are in for the last day today, has Pesach, which is Passover, and Yom HaShoah, which just passed a couple of days ago. That's Holocaust Remembrance Day. That's why we had our Holocaust Remembrance service over the weekend. ER is our next month. On here it says Ivar, which is not a thing, but it's ER. And on that, we have Yom HaZikaron and Yom HaAtzmaut. That's Israeli Remembrance Day and Israeli Independence Day. Now, Lag BeOmer, I have to explain something to get to Lag BeOmer, so we'll push that aside for 1 second. Sivan, we have Shavuot, which is a day where we acknowledge the Torah being given at Sinai. It's kind of the opposite side of the year as Simchat Torah. It's the giving of the Torah at Mount Sinai. And between Passover and Shavuot, we count the Omer. So we're basically counting between the beginning of the grain harvest and the end of the grain harvest, between Passover and Shavuot. And so we count those weeks, the 49 weeks between Pesach and Shavuot. And so that's called counting the Omer. Lag BeOmer is a way to symbolically represent the number 33 in Hebrew. And so it's the 33rd day of the Omer, and there's lots of Kabbalistic meaning, a lot of spiritual Jewish, what's the word? Not spirituality, Jewish mysticism has a lot of meaning on that day. I'm not very versed in Jewish mysticism, but if you're curious, I can certainly look more into that, about the meanings of Lag BeOmer. But one of the other bits of Lag BaOmer is that between Passover and Shavuot, we're in kind of a minor period of mourning. So we don't cut our hair between Passover and Shavuot.
I
A
didn't
lot
know
of
that.
a lot of men don't shave between Passover and Shavuot. There are certain practices we avoid. We don't have weddings between Passover and Shavuot. So it's kind of a mourning. It's a subdued period of mourning because back in the day, this was the harvest season. There's a lot of anxiety
Right.
during that period of time. So we refrain from doing certain things because we're in that state of anxiety. How much crop are we going to be able to harvest this year? And so Lag BaOmer is kind of a break in all of that. Lag BaOmer is the day to get your hair cut. Lots of weddings happen on Lag BaOmer, especially if it's on a weekend. Lag BaOmer is our break in that morning. And some people will choose to go back into the period of mourning after Lag BaOmer, after day 33. Some people will choose to end their period of mourning on that day. Tammuz is in the heat of the summer, and it's there's a fast day in there, a minor fast day. And we have Tisha B'Av, which is the 9th of Av. On Tisha B'Av, we remember a whole bunch of different Jewish tragedies, most significantly the destruction of the first and second temples. That's a full fast day. And leading up to Tisha B'Av, starting in Tammuz, we have the 3 weeks of mourning. So in those 3 weeks, that's a more intense mourning than during the Omer. And so a lot of people will not listen to music during that period of time. Again, no weddings. They won't go to parties during that period of time.
Period of time, do you mean?
For the 3 weeks before Tisha B'Av. So Tisha B'Av is the 9th of Av.
Right.
So starting with the 17th of Tammuz, which is a minor fast day.
Okay.
We for the next 3 weeks, we're in a period of mourning. Some people won't eat meat. So there are certain mourning practices we take on. Then Elul, I was wrong when I said that Cheshvan is the only holiday without the only month without holidays. Elul has no holidays because Elul is the month where we prepare for Tishrei. Elul is this month of intense study and really self-study, because we're getting ready for the Day of Atonement. We're getting ready for the new year. We're trying to figure out, what is it that I want to work on in this year to come? Who do I need to ask for forgiveness? Who do I need to forgive before I get to that Day of Atonement? And that was just our overview. So any questions before we dive even deeper?
Oh, that was good.
All right. I love this division of the holidays, of the major holidays. There are lots of other holidays, but we're going to focus on these big ones. Here we have our people's story, which is I got this slideshow from the Miller program, but also I'm going to put here, these are biblical holidays. Or I should say not just biblical, because there are other ones. These are the pilgrimage holidays. So these are the times that in the ancient world that we would make pilgrimage to Jerusalem and offer special holiday sacrifices. These are really also the harvest holidays. Remember, I was talking about the different harvest seasons, right? Where Sukkot is the fall harvest, and Pesach and Shavuot are the spring harvest, spring and summer harvest. These are spoken about really in tandem in the Torah. Moments to pause. Really, these are the holiest of our holidays. Shabbat happens every single week, as you were saying, Sephora. Shabbat is the seventh day of the week, and each of these holidays actually starts in the evening before. It starts in the evening, goes through the next evening. So Shabbat starts Friday night and Saturday night. Rosh Hashanah is our Jewish New Year, and Yom Kippur is our Day of Atonement. These happen 10 days apart, so the 10 days between them are an intense period of introspection. And then the holidays of history. These are holidays that come later in history. Hanukkah is written about in the book of Maccabees, which is not even in our Bible. Right? The book of Maccabees is kind of a separate book that came later. It's not even in Hebrew. It's written originally in the Greek. Purim is in our Tanakh, but way late in our Tanakh. It's in the book of Esther, the story of Esther, and Tisha B'Av is kind of sort of referred to in Jeremiah, but the story of the destruction of the first temple is at the end of both Jeremiah and the second Kings. But Tisha B'Av also, again, recognizes other tragedies that happened. There are a whole bunch of expulsions of the Jewish people that happened throughout history on that day. The Jewish calendar is an experiential curriculum. So when we celebrate each of these holidays, we do rituals to re-experience it. And like the Passover Seder, sometimes on these holidays, we do rituals that seem really weird so that we can have a hook to remember what happened on that day. So we're about to learn about Shake a Lemon holiday. We shake a lemon because partially because the Torah says so, but partially because it's absolutely ridiculous and it helps us remember, oh, that's Sukkot. That's our holiday of Sukkot. So we have these Shalosh Regalim, these 3 pilgrimage festivals. And I included in here the biblical verses because I know that I don't know, Sephora, if you have how much experience you have with Tanakh, but I know that Joyce, you have a lot of experience with the Bible. So we're going to look at the biblical origin stories for each of these holidays. So I bolded the key points here, but this is our Passover origin stories really starts Exodus chapter 12, and it is commanded in several places throughout Tanakh, but our Exodus story is really chapter 12. This is the, let's read it. So I'm going to give us a moment to just read this to ourselves. This is the story in which we're in the 10th plague and we're about to experience the 10th plague. God is about to pass over all of the houses, and we are prescribed this ritual, this once and then annual ritual to remember or to gain God's trust enough not to have our firstborn killed. So the question I want to ask is, what are we being commanded to do on Passover? And anytime you see one of these things that we're commanded to do.
The first one is eat unleavened bread.
Great. Eat unleavened bread.
And remove it from your home.
Mm-hmm.
What does that mean?
Great.
What is leavened bread?
So leavened bread, when we ask what that means, first of all, biblically, it might mean something different or it does mean something different than the way that we practice today. So leavened bread means, I would imagine biblically it meant bread that, today and biblically, it's bread that didn't have time to rise. And so when it's saying remove leaven from your houses, biblically, I would wonder, what does that sound like literally to remove leaven from your houses? If we were to read that verse literally?
I would think it would mean like remove what the flour and the ingredients. I can't think.
Yeah.
That it takes to make that.
Yeah, so that is actually how we interpret it now, is all of the grain products. So all the grain products that are found in Torah, which is wheat, rye, barley, oats, spelt, all of those are going to be removed from our houses on the holiday.
What was that last one? Wheat, rye, barley,
Oats and spelt.
oats.
So all of those are removed from our houses.
So symbolically, is would you say it's kind of a fast of sorts? I mean, you're
In a way.
removing. Okay.
But it's not so much a fast, because we're still commanded to eat to celebrate on Pesach. So we're told to celebrate every time that we've got a sacrifice, a pilgrimage sacrifice. It's basically a celebration. It's bringing your children to Disneyland, right? Because you go to the temple and you bring an animal, and what do you do with that animal? Barbecue. Like, this is your chance to have a big barbecue. So no leaven shall be found in your house for 7 days. Eat nothing leavened, right? Definitely no leaven. You have a sacred occasion. Every time that our Torah says have a sacred occasion on the first day, a sacred occasion on the 7th day, no work shall be done. That's a day that in Judaism we say this is a no work day. So on the 1st and 7th day of Passover, we have no work days. In the modern day, we take off the 1st, 2nd, 7th, and 8th. We'll get to that. Another big part of Passover is when your children ask you, what do you mean by this rite? You shall say it's the Passover sacrifice to God, because God passed over the houses of the Israelites in Egypt when God smote the Egyptians, but saved our houses.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
Didn't they have to place blood above their doors
Yes.
in order to?
So let's read that part. Moses summoned all the Israelite elders of Israel and said to them, go pick out lambs for your families and slaughter the Passover offering.
Okay, yeah.
Take the bunch of hyssop, dip it in the blood that's in the basin, and apply some of that blood that is in the basin to the lintel and the 2 doorposts. So what's interesting is we're slaughtering the Passover offering, which is going to be a big celebration, but that's the blood that's going to be used for the doorposts.
Okay.
So they're putting the blood on in celebration. For when Adonai goes through to smite the Egyptians, he will see the blood on the lintel and the 2 doorposts, and Adonai will pass over the door and not let the destroyer enter and smite your house. You shall observe this as an institution for all time for you and your descendants. And when you enter this land, as God has promised, you should observe this rite. So the big question is, how do we observe this rite? If we're supposed to be doing it forever and ever and ever, how do we observe it? Because we live in a little bit of a different world today. We have this commandment here. When your children ask you this question, you give them an answer. So Passover is a very demonstrative holiday because it's supposed to be an answer to children who ask questions. Passover is the big holiday of answering kids' questions.
Okay.
So through Passover, we tell the story of the Exodus, and we symbolically reenact the whole story through the Seder. We are going to learn more about Passover later, because there's a lot to say. We're going to have a whole class on it. But to show you a little bit about how it's a demonstrative holiday, this is a toy Seder plate. We put this in the middle of the table when we're eating our Passover meal. and we integrate these ingredients into the story that we tell, into our service. So we've got a shank bone that is supposed to represent that lamb. We have charoset, which is like this sticky sweet food. All cultures do it differently, but it's a sticky sweet food that is supposed to represent the mortar of the bricks that the slaves made. The chazeret, the lettuce, and the maror are both bitter herbs that represent, or are both bitter vegetables that represent the bitterness of slavery. Parsley is representing springtime. This is our spring holiday. And eggs represent if we're looking symbolically, if we're looking in a spiritual way, eggs are round. So in the olden days, this was actually considered the beginning of the new year. This is the new year instead of Rosh Hashanah, instead of the fall. So it's, the roundness of the year. But also it represents a different sacrifice that they would also make on that day. Pesach questions. It's a lot. All right. Shavuot is our next holiday. The first time we learn about Shavuot is in the book of Leviticus, but we'll learn about it again later. We learn about it several times. And I'll talk us through these verses and explain a little bit how we use these verses today. And from the day on which you bring the sheaf of the elevation offering, the day after the Sabbath, and we're talking about the day after the Sabbath, after Passover, you shall count off 7 weeks. Now, this is kind of weird because in Judaism today, or really in Judaism, in ancient Judaism, the rabbis around the year 0 figured, well, the date of the Shabbat that comes after Passover is different every year. We need to make it easier to calculate than that. And so they standardized the date of Shavuot to start the second night of Passover, or the date of the Omer, the counting, to start the second night of Passover. So 50 days, then you shall, oops.
I'm so sorry.
No, you're okay. You shall bring a new offering of new grain to God. So those 50 days that we count in the Omer, and we're in the Omer right now, are those days between Passover and Shavuot. You make an elevation offering and you bring your first fruits to Adonai. So you bring the first stuff that you harvest, the first grain product that you harvest to God. You bring a whole bunch of sacrifices. And on that same day, again, you shall hold a celebration. It shall be a sacred occasion for you. You shall not work at your occupations. This is a law for all time in your settlements throughout the ages. So again, day of not working, day of Disneyland with the family. And this is to happen for all time. So we're still celebrating it because we're told it's got to happen for all time. Today, it's evolved into a holiday where we commemorate the revelation at Sinai, because the ancient rabbis calculated that between the Exodus and Sinai are those 50 days.
Okay.
So we have, to celebrate Shavuot, we have an all-night learning session because we're celebrating Torah. We also read the book of Ruth, because in the book of Ruth happens during the wheat harvest. And we eat dairy desserts. Why do we eat dairy desserts? Who knows? Actually, I taught about it last year, but I don't remember why we eat dairy desserts.
Oh, okay.
I should look that up. But it is a custom, and I'll look that up again. Sukkot is our next pilgrimage festival. This is in the fall. So this is after the High Holy Days. On the 15th day of the 7th month, there shall be a feast of booths to Adonai. So booths, when we're talking about booths, we're talking about huts. So nowadays, to celebrate Shavuot or to celebrate Sukkot, we build a hut and we eat in that hut for 7 days. The first day should be a sacred occasion, so it's a day of no work. You're bringing offerings. In the ancient world, they brought offerings for 7 days. Then they brought another offering, a smaller offering, on the 8th day, where they didn't work. So the first day and the 8th day are our holidays, 8 days of offerings. So now we celebrate Sukkot for 7 days and Shmini Atzeret and Simchat Torah on the 8th day. On the first day, you shall take the product of Hadar trees. Hadar is myrtle, branches of palm trees, boughs of leafy trees, and willows of the brook, and you shall rejoice before God your 7 days. I think on the next page, do we have the, we'll have a demonstration on this page, but we bring together a whole bunch of plants and we shake them. It's shake a lemon day, but it's not a lemon. We use what's called an etrog. You shall observe it as a festival for 7 days in the 7th month throughout the ages. So again, throughout the ages, that means we've got to still do it. You should live in booths 7 days, so that because God made the Israelite people live in booths when I brought them out of the land of Egypt. I am Adonai, your God. Now, if you've read Tanakh, if you've read Torah, the big question here is, what does it mean, made the Israelite people live in booths? Because they probably didn't live in booths. They probably lived in something more like tents. So when we think about our sukkah, about our sukkot, our booths, we think symbolically that perhaps this verse is referring to the shelter that God gave over the people Israel. God, the Ananei Hakavod, the clouds, the holy clouds that God's presence was found in. So that's Sukkot. Love to show a little video about Sukkot that shows you some of the visuals, although in Lego form.
I'm Evan Wolkenstein. You can call me Woke. I call Sukkot the Jewish picnic holiday because you get to eat your meals outside, and you build a hut to provide shade for you, your family, and your guests. And you do it for a week. Oh, and you wave around a trident made out of plants and a weird lemon thing. Wait, stop, back up. How did we end up with a holiday like this? God tells Moses to tell the Israelites about the 3 awesome parties, aka harvest festivals, they will have once they reach the promised land: Passover, Shavuot, and the fall harvest, the festival of booths, Sukkot. Why? Because, as God tells Moses, the people of Israel shall dwell in booths. Now here, a booth doesn't mean a phone booth or a photo booth. It means a festival picnic hut. And we're supposed to live and eat in our festival picnic huts, our Sukkot. You're supposed to sleep in it, study Torah in it, hang out in it. In some places you can sukkah hop, enjoying food and l'chaim all night long. The sukkah is a symbol not only of the harvest, when ancient crop harvesters spent nights in the field huts, but also of the clouds of glory God created to protect the Israelites wandering in the desert. So we make our Sukkot today comfy, magical places. Some families hang gourds, strings of popcorn, paper chains, drawings, disco balls. The one thing that ties them all together is tzach, the plant matter on top. 4 out of 5 rabbis agree that tzach is the most beautiful word in the Hebrew language. And there's more. God said on the first day of this festival, take the fruit of good trees, branches of palm trees, boughs of leafy trees, and willows of the brook, and party it up before God. That's all the Torah has to say on the subject of the harvest holiday, but fortunately the Talmud explains what to do with these 4 species. The 3 green species we bind together into a green lulav. Meanwhile, the fruit of the good tree is identified as an etrog. An etrog has an amazing fresh citrus smell, but if you chop it open, there's like 0 fruit inside. Don't bother trying to eat it. You'll just be pissed off. You hold the etrog to the hilt of the lulav. You shake it around and boom, you fulfilled a mitzvah. Some mitzvot are so easy. The Kabbalist Arizal said we shake it in 6 directions to draw energy to the heart, each direction symbolizing a mystical sphere. Lula, so cool, but what's the meaning? Well, like so many Jewish traditions, there are multiple answers. Some say the 4 species symbolize parts of the body. Others say different types of people. Me, I just enjoy the feeling, the sound, and the smell. Sukkot has a special synagogue service with extra prayers, songs, and a lulav parade. And no Jewish holiday would be complete without a festive meal, in this case, in the sukkah. It'd take about 7 days just to explain the rules about building Sukkot. But that said, I've seen Sukkot on balconies, I've seen the skylight covered in schach, and the clever sukkah-mobile. In Detroit, there's a shipping freight sukkah. In Venice, there's a boat sukkah. In Portland, a sukkah on a bike trailer, of course. And others have gone way out the box. But they all have schach on top. From palm fronds and pine needles, the schach has a deep, deep symbolism to it. It must be sparse enough to allow rain in to let you see the stars, and yet it must be thick enough to provide more shade than sun. One way to understand it, God's light pours into this world, filling it with life. But we can't look straight at the light. It's blinding. It takes clouds, or schach, to filter this light into a form we can appreciate, understand, and handle. Maybe the idea is that in our world, we can't see God, but we can see God's shadow in acts of kindness, in acts of justice, in each other's faces.
There are a whole lot of rules to Sukkot, or to building that sukkah. And again, it's one of those holidays, some weird traditions to help us to remember to keep the holiday. So just as a review, why celebrate Passover?
Why do we celebrate it?
Just to remember, to remember,
To remember what?
to remember when the ritual and of when I'm still trying to understand.
Mhm.
It's so the firstborn children were ordered to be killed. So it was a ritual meant to, I guess, symbolically, spiritually keep the evil people away that were killing the babies.
So not quite. So in the book of Exodus,
Okay.
there are the Hebrews are slaves to the Egyptians.
Mm-hmm.
And Moses goes to Pharaoh a bunch of times and says, "Let my people go." And Moses is guided by God in all of this. Pharaoh says no. And so God puts 10 plagues on the Egyptians. The 10th
Mhm.
plague is God, is that God or an angel of God will come to every Egyptian house and kill the firstborn. And so in order to stave off that destroyer, as it's called in some translations, the Israelites will sacrifice this lamb and put the lamb's blood on the doorposts. So that's the lamb part. But
Mm-hmm.
big thing to remember about Passover in general is that it represents the Exodus from Egypt. So this is
Okay.
our way of remembering Exodus from Egypt. That's the big theme of Passover.
Okay.
Exodus from Egypt, and really freedom in general. So on Passover, we really spend a lot of time talking about how are we free? Where do we need to be a little bit more free? And where in the world is there still slavery?
Yep.
So Shavuot, why do we celebrate Shavuot?
That's where they gave the Torah
Yeah,
at Mount Sinai.
yeah, exactly. Where God gave us Torah at Mount Sinai. That's why we're celebrating Shavuot. That's our big
Okay.
theme.
I have why do they have so many different for instance, and this may come up later, but
Mm.
one thing that confuses me is there's different names, like Hanukkah. It's spelled 2 or 3 different ways. And
Yeah.
so are a lot of these holidays. They're spelled differently, and it looks like a different holiday to me.
Absolutely. So that is that has to do with what's called transliteration. It's the way that Hebrew is written in English letters. So if I'm trying to see if I can,
I'm sorry, that's kind of
no, it's
out of,
but it's
um,
important to know. It's important to know. So let's see if I can show this on a whiteboard. So Hanukkah, for instance, is in Hebrew, it's spelled like this. So Ha. This first letter, a chet, so Hebrew's right to left. So this first letter, a chet, can be written, it makes a ch sound. How do you write a ch sound in English?
but I would do it with a C or an H.
Okay, so with a C or an H. So you, Joyce, would choose to write Hanukkah starting with a CH.
Probably.
Now, the problem with that is that if you've never met a Jewish person before and never heard about Judaism, never heard about Hebrew, how would you pronounce that? Ch, right? So it's not always the most useful transliteration. So you could just give up on the h sound, on the ch sound, and write it like that. You could also do what I do, and for some reason it doesn't let me underline here, but I'll write the H with a dot underneath or an underline underneath, just to show you that it's not a normal h sound. Also, the ch sound is really hard for people to pronounce. So if you want to get close, you can just say it as a h. So Hanukkah. So pretty standard. You can put an A after that for the ah sound. So and also the next sound, chan, is just an N. This is an oo sound, so that usually is an oo. This letter here makes a k sound. Now, the issue is there are 2 different types of k sounds, or 2 different k letters, kind of like we have C and K, right? 2 different k letters. So how do we show that it's this particular k letter?
What you have underneath it.
Well, so underneath it, that's a vowel.
Okay.
But how do you show that it's this particular letter? Some people show it by putting 1K, or by putting 1K, but some people show it by putting 2 Ks.
Okay.
So it depends what school of transliteration you have. And then the AH at the end is to represent this letter at the end is a hey. It's a h sound, but you don't pronounce it because it's at the end of the word. So if you want to make it easy to pronounce, you might take off the H. But really but if you want to be formalistic about it, you put a hey at the end. So my favorite way to spell it is like this, with the dot underneath the H. But everywhere you see it, it's going to be different.
I know. And if you did not know anything about Judaism and you saw those 3 different in different places, you wouldn't know it was the same thing.
Mm-hmm. Right.
So,
And similar with Shemini Atzeret.
Okay.
I'll just show you the word Shemini.
Meaning.
Can be either of these things. Shemini. So with Shemini Atzeret, there's underneath the sh letter. The sh letter is a shin, and there's a vowel underneath the sh letter that doesn't really make a sound. But you can't really go from sh to very easily without making a sound. So we represent that by writing it shmini. Some
Okay.
people just say, why do you need the little dash thing? Just write it
Mhm.
shmini without the dash.
Mhm.
And some people represent that little vowel by saying shemini.
Okay. Well, I know the months. I've seen them spelled different ways.
Right. And throughout time too, throughout time, the Ashkenazi Jews and Sephardic Jews have pronounced these words differently, which means that they're written differently. Another good
Okay.
example is Agudath Achim. If you were to pronounce it the way that we pronounce Hebrew in the synagogue today, it would be Agudat Achim without the th.
Okay.
But the academic way to spell that back in the day was with a th.
Okay.
So probably more than you were asking, but
No, and that's great. And I'm sorry to interrupt the
no, it's
lesson
important.
with that. It just something we did and said made me think of that.
Right.
Okay.
Always interrupt with questions. Very important. This is our picture of the 4 species that we wave around on Sukkot. And Sukkot. Why do we celebrate Sukkot?
So you can dance.
So you can dance and have a great time. Actually, in the Mishnah, there are descriptions of Sukkot as like really the holiday, really the party festival. There would be musicians and dancers and acrobats but why else?
Well, it's the harvest. It's the fall harvest.
Yeah, it's the fall harvest, and also to remember that we lived in booths when we were out of Egypt. Who knows what booths we're talking about? But the Torah tells us we lived in booths. So here's something that's a little bit confusing. How long do we celebrate the holidays? This has to do with whether we are in the diaspora, which means outside of Israel, or Israel. In Israel, we acknowledge the holidays according to the number of days that it says in Torah. The Reform movement also goes by the way that it's celebrated in Israel. Back in the day, the way that they regulated the calendar was that you'd have messengers back and forth from Jerusalem to wherever outside of Israel you were. So it would take a really long time to get here and there. So the rabbis added an extra day to a whole bunch of holidays to take account of that journey, just in case they had the wrong day. So they would celebrate for an extra day just in case. So on Shavuot, we have it's 2 days long here, 1 day in Israel. Rosh Hashanah, it's 2 days everywhere because we want to be really, 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 really sure that we're celebrating it right. That's because it's such a holy day. Yom Kippur is 1 day everywhere. Hanukkah is 8 days everywhere. Purim is 1 day everywhere. Tisha B'Av is 1 day everywhere. But Pesach, which Passover and Shavuot, is where it gets really confusing. So we have 7 days. That's all right. So we have 7 days is when we're initially supposed to celebrate. In the Torah, it says that on day 1 and 7, you should celebrate, those are our days off, our big holidays, days 1 and 7. But we celebrate in the diaspora on days 1 and 2 and 7 and 8. And the in-between days are called Chol HaMoed. There are still holidays, but we can work on those holidays.
You have a lot of holidays that you don't work.
We have a lot of holidays when we don't work.
have those as Christians.
But there are quite a few, right?
Well,
There's Christmas, there's Easter.
but yes, you're right. But a lot of people, I don't know that factories close because of that,
Mm.
and
Right.
and certain I don't think school's closed for Christmas,
Mhm.
but, you know what I'm saying? I think
Right.
a lot of people, they don't recognize that as a no work day. I do,
Mhm.
but,
So a lot of Jewish days won't take off for, or a lot of Jewish schools might not take off for some of the, they call them in England, the bank holidays,
mhm,
right? They'll acknowledge Memorial Day, Veterans Day, etc., but they might not take off on those days because there are so many other days during the year that they take off,
mhm,
or they'll have fall break during that holiday.
mhm,
But it's in Judaism, we recognize that taking that pause is so important. It's right. It's like this quote here that the pause, we need that pause to recuperate.
mhm,
And so not just every week, but in each season, because each holiday has a different mood.
Mhm.
And so on Passover, we take that time to reflect on our freedom, because when else would we? And Sukkot, we reflect on our joy, because when else would we?
mhm.
So it's that time to pause and reflect on whatever the mood is, whatever the theme is of that day. But you're right, it's a lot of time to rest. But also in Torah, and we didn't read this in these verses, but you're supposed to celebrate not just with your family, but with the strangers in your midst, with those who, it says in Torah, with your slaves, but really those who are working for you. And so it's also an acknowledgement that the people around you need to rest too.
Mhm. Okay.
That I don't want people working for me on the holiday. Now, it's in the modern day that's made more complicated because in some families or some synagogues, we'll have somebody who's not Jewish work for us on the holiday because that's not their custom, but we have specific rules around that. Okay, we will pay them before, or I guess if they're salaried, or depending on how payroll goes, we just wouldn't pay on a Saturday.
Mhm.
And we would not ask Julie to do something, or we wouldn't ask the person who is not Jewish who's working for us to do work on the holiday. So Julie will cook, but only if we tell her before the holiday to cook,
Mhm.
if that makes sense.
Mhm.
That's why we write out instructions before the holiday for her, because we can't go around and follow her around and say, okay, chop that, cook that,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Yeah. That makes sense.
Mm-hmm. So holidays of history, got Hanukkah, Purim, and Tisha B'Av. These are outside of the Torah. We don't need to read all of this right now, but what I think is really interesting, actually, you know what? Let's read it. So in Hanukkah has two different origin stories, and one of them is in Maccabees, not in the Tanakh. This is written in Greek, and one of them is in the Talmud. So I'd love, Sephora, can you read this first paragraph? And we're going to ask the question, why celebrate Hanukkah?
Yes. Now Judah Maccabee and his followers recovered the temple in Jerusalem, and they tore down the altars which had been built in the public square by foreigners. They purified the sanctuary and made a new altar of sacrifice. Then, striking fire out of flint, they offered sacrifices after a lapse of 2 years, and they burned incense and lit the lamps. It happened that on the same day on which the sanctuary had been profaned, the purification of the sanctuary took place, that is, on the 25th day of Kislev. They celebrated for 8 days with rejoicing in the manner of Sukkot, remembering how not long before during Sukkot they had been wandering in the mountains and cave like wild animals.
Right. So some context
much.
that I shouldn't have given before that is that the Greek Assyrians came in and both encouraged lots of idol worship, which a lot of the Jews at the time were happy to do, and really decimated the inside of the temple, put a lot of idols there. But the Maccabees were kind of a fringe group, and they rose up. They got the Greeks out. They got the Assyrian Greeks out of the temple, and restored the priestly way of doing things. And so it's an interesting holiday because they were kind of a fringe group at the time who were restoring the way that Judaism was practiced. If you read Maccabees, they don't do so in the most peaceful way. But according to this excerpt, why do we celebrate Hanukkah? Or why do we celebrate Hanukkah for 8 days? Let's start there. What is one of our holidays that's celebrated for 8 days? Got Sukkot. So Hanukkah is a repeat of Sukkot. They were fighting during Sukkot, or they were wandering in the mountain and caves during Sukkot. And so they celebrated Hanukkah for those 8 days as a redo.
Oh, okay.
It's a redo of Sukkot. So for Joyce, can you read the Talmudic idea of why we celebrate Hanukkah?
I have to get closer.
Yeah.
The rabbi asked, "What is Hanukkah?" On the 25th day of Kislev, the Hanukkah festival begins. There are 8 days during which eulogies for the dead and fasting are prohibited. For when the Greeks entered the temple, they defiled all the oil stored in it. After the Maccabees had established their rule and prevailed, they searched and found one single cruse of oil, still sealed with the seal of the high priest. But there was only enough oil to last for 1 day. A miracle occurred, and the supply lasted for 8 days. In the following year, they appointed these days as a festival.
Wonderful. So why 8 days of Hanukkah according to this?
To celebrate the miracle.
Celebrate the
Mhm.
miracle. The oil lasted for 8 days. And really in general, we're celebrating our ability to be Jews in a world that did not accept Judaism. Because Judaism was forbidden or Jewish practice was forbidden by the Greeks at the time. And their sanctuary, their temple was desecrated. So it's that restoration of the temple. It's our ability to practice as Jews in a world where we're a minority. So just a quick video of how to light the Hanukkah, just so you can see it done. Hanukkah is not for quite a while, but it's a big public holiday because it's an easy thing to do, and it's fun. There's a lot of, because that miracle of oil, we eat a lot of oily foods, right? So, and we play games. Again, all of this stuff to get our kids and each of us to remember the past and to celebrate for the future. One other story I want to share about why Hanukkah, that it's a little known Talmudic story, but I love it. There's this story of Adam where he is living his first year ever on earth, Adam and Eve together. They're living their first year together on earth, and they notice that every day, the day is getting shorter and shorter and shorter. It's getting darker and darker and darker. And Adam and Eve say, "Oh my goodness, this is our punishment. We're being punished for what we did in the garden, or we're being punished for what we initially did in the garden. And the world's just going to be dark forever." And then solstice happens and the days go backwards, right? Days start getting lighter and lighter and lighter. Hanukkah is their time to celebrate that moment when it shifts, the darkest moment of the year. And so we light lights to remind ourselves it's coming, light's coming back. And that's why we have, and it says this in the Talmud, that's why the Greeks have these solstice holidays. And that's why we have our holiday, right? And, in a sense, it's exciting that Christmas is that time too. That's why so many, and Diwali as well. We have all these light holidays to celebrate the light that's to come in this darkest time of the year.
Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav, v'tzivanu lehadlik ner shel Chanukah. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, she'asa nisim lavotenu bayamim ha'hem ba'azman hazeh. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, שהחיינו וקיימנו והגיענו לזמן הזה.
So on Hanukkah, we say, as we're lighting our candles, we say 3 blessings, 2 or 3, depending on the night. Our first blessing is the blessing that we say for the mitzvah, for the commandment of lighting the candles. We say a very similar blessing on Shabbat. The funny thing, I think, is for both Shabbat and Hanukkah, we're saying the blessing that indicates that God commanded us to do this. But there's nowhere in Torah or Tanakh in which we are commanded to light Shabbat candles, or we're commanded to light Hanukkah candles. But this act is seen as so sacred that it's elevated to that level of commandment. So our second is the thank you for a miracle blessing. And then our third is the blessing that we say for doing anything new. So that's the one that's said on the first night. For Purim is a reading of the book of Esther, very in a similar vein to Hanukkah. This is another one of our miracle stories. This is about the miracle of Queen Esther, who is a Jew, and she, her husband, the king's advisor, wants to kill all of the Jews, but Esther comes up with a plan so that he does not, so that the king does not kill all of the Jews, and not so much left after this. But for Purim, we have 4 mitzvot. We read the story of Esther. We have a big celebration. We give to friends, so mishloach manot, which are gifts to friend, and then we give to charity. We give matanot le'avyonim, give gifts to the poor. Those are the 4 big things of Purim. And also a lot of people dress up on Purim. People wear costumes as well. Both of these are seen as holidays, both Hanukkah and Purim. The big theme of both of these are acknowledging the miracle, are publicizing the miracle. So we try to make, for Hanukkah, we put our Chanukiot, our lamps, right in the front window so that everyone can see that we experience this miracle. And so too on Purim, we read the Megillah in a very dramatic way. We read the story of Esther in a very dramatic way. We wear costumes, we do plays to publicize that miracle, to make sure everyone knows that we experienced that miracle from God. Tisha B'Av, again, commemorates those tragedies. We read the Book of Lamentations, and then we hope that the Messiah will be born, or we pray for the Messiah to be born on Tisha B'Av in the days to come. Any questions, comments, concerns about all of these holidays?
No, but I have a question about
Mhm.
when you're lighting the menorah and
Mhm.
and she sang the blessing.
Mhm.
Well, here's the blessing, but it doesn't have it in English, and on there it had it in English.
Mhm.
So can you tell me what the English or
Absolutely.
do you print that out for us or
The
you send it?
I can send that to you.
Okay,
But
that'll work.
it's good to know though. So the first blessing,
Mhm.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam. So every blessing, every Jewish blessing starts out with that. That's blessed are you, Adonai our God, ruler of the universe or sovereign of the universe. And that we're going to learn a little bit more about, but every
Okay.
blessing starts out with that.
Okay.
And then every mitzvah blessing, every blessing about something that you're going to do, continues, who sanctified us with God's commandments, so who sanctified us with the commandments, and commanded us to do X, Y, and Z. So that's the add-on we do for mitzvah blessings. And then it continues for lighting the Hanukkah candles.
Okay.
The second blessing starts out with that same formulation. Blessed are you, Adonai, our God, ruler of the universe, who made miracles for our ancestors in those days and in this day. So bringing that past into the present. And then the third, again, we say anytime we do something new. So it's blessed are you, Adonai, our God, ruler of the universe, who revitalized us, who like re-lifed us, gave us life, and who upheld us, like who held us up, and who helped us to arrive at this time.
Okay.
But I can send you,
Yes,
send you
please
that video.
do. I'm just writing.
Well, I'm curious if there's a holiday for either of you that you're excited to try at some point in the future, or one that intrigues you.
Several of them intrigue me,
Mhm.
but I would like to. I've always been curious about Sukkot.
Mhm.
I just think that's it's almost like a ritual that, you know, I'm curious about Sukkot.
Have you ever, I can't remember whether we did this my first year, but have you ever just eaten lunch outside in the sukkah during Sukkot? The nice thing now is that we actually have a nice sukkah.
Right. I was here when they
Had the green thing.
well, I mean, they built them out of everything. Each year it was different, but yeah.
So now we have a nice sukkah.
Right.
And the past couple of years, we've just set out tables and people come and eat lunch or eat
Oh.
dinner there. So
Okay.
you are welcome to during the
I'm
day,
sure I
go out
will.
and bring your
Mhm.
lunch. And you are welcome to also Sephora because it's outside and outside isn't locked. And so definitely Sukkot. And then also you should ask to try to shake the
Yeah.
leaves. They smell really good.
Yeah. Okay.
But it's cathartic. It's nice.
Mhm.
Sephora, how about you? Is there a holiday that stands out?
Well, I wanted to ask a question about Hanukkah. What is the ninth candle, the middle candle again? I know it said
Right.
something, but my mind tends to think about things that are not in front of
Right.
me. So I was processing and I missed what the middle candle was.
Right. The ninth candle is used to light all the rest of the candles.
Okay. I thought I heard that it had a symbolism also, though.
So shamash means the guide or the leader.
Okay. Okay.
But that's,
I like the symbolism of it. It kind of reminds me of Advent in Catholicism
mhm.
around Christmas. It has a different symbolism, but I mean it's similar. I mean it's representing blessings. Um, but yeah, I do
Right, a
like
lot
the
of that
symbolism of it.
symbolic counting. There's something to that symbolic counting that
Yeah,
that reorients us.
yeah.
So happy 14th day of the Omer.
Oh, that's today?
Mhm. That
What is
today.
Omer again?
That is the counting. Omer literally means a sheaf of wheat, but it's the numbers that we count between Passover and Shavuot.
Okay.
Is it?
And I got a haircut last week, so my bad.
That's okay. Okay. A lot of Jews don't know that that's something that we do, that we don't cut our hair between those times.
I mean, I heard that earlier when you said that,
Mhm.
but yeah, I'm just making a joke.
Yeah.
Mm.
All good.
Yeah.
I forgot to get my pre-Passover haircut. All right. Well, thank you for learning with me. I'm going to try to figure out how to upload this so that the others can see it, because there's a lot of information packed into here. Let me know if you have any questions. And
Thank
next
you.
week, we'll have a few rabbis tell us about their movements.
Cool.
Good. I look forward to it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.